Hello good humans, how will you react when I say normalizing or encouraging having premarital sex will lead to the fall of that society? Have you ever thought about why almost every culture across the world repressed sexual activities before marriage throughout the time till the current modern days? Lowering the restrictions or removing the restrictions to have sex before marriage mostly ended in that society's downfall, and within 3 generations, that culture was conquered or taken over by other powerful cultures. You can't believe what I am saying, right? J.D.Unwin is an English ethnologist and social anthropologist at Oxford University and Cambridge University. He studied culture and tribes and published his studies in a book titled Sex and Culture in 1934. In Sex and Culture, Unwin studied 80 primitive tribes and 6 known civilizations through 5,000 years of history and claimed there was a positive correlation between the cultural achievement of a people and the sexual restraint they observe. I will post the link to an article where the author explained the summary of Unwin's Sex and Culture book detailed in a simpler way. Through his studies, Unwin found the most common reason for the downfall of almost every culture he studied. So what did he found? Number 1, if a society or a culture loosens or removes its sexual restraints and allows complete sexual freedom, it always led to the collapse of that culture within 3 generations. Number 2, premarital chastity is the single most important factor. He finds that in a culture where strict premarital chastity was no longer the norm, that culture's practice of absolute monogamy and rational thinking are also disappeared within 3 generations. Number 3, when a culture embraces total sexual freedom, that culture was collapsed to the lowest state, known as inert. At this level, the culture is usually conquered or taken over by another culture with greater social energy. Unwin's generation appears approximately 33 years, so 3 generations mean approximately a century. So it would take nearly 100 years to see the full effect of a cultural change. You may think how this is relevant to the current time. As I mentioned, the book was published in 1934, which is before the sexual revolution of the United States in the 1960s and 1970s. Now you look at the US, where premarital sex is normal, we can find that promiscuity is common and sexual morality is at an all-time low. This is not only happening in the US, but also in countries where Western culture is being followed. The US has the world's highest rate of children living in single-parent households, and the children raised by single-mother households, fatherless, experience more physical and psychological problems and are more likely to commit crimes in their adolescence than those who were raised in 2-parent households with their father. Marriages are declining and singles are rising. Prior to the sexual revolution which began in the late 1960s, prenuptial chastity was still held in strong regard by Western culture. But, starting in the 1970s, premarital sexual freedom became increasingly acceptable. By the early 2000s, the majority of teens were sexually active, to the extent that remaining a virgin until marriage was regarded with disbelief if not ridicule. At the same time, Western culture moved from a social norm of absolute monogamy to modified monogamy. We can clearly see the downfall of Western culture, but it's not only for them, it's also for every culture where its restrictions of sexual morality and prenuptial chastity start to loosen up. The Indian or Hindu society also has been following prenuptial chastity strictly till this generation, but our current generation starts to loosen up this. I have already made a video of how our generation starts to normalize and encourage having premarital sex. And now, after reading Sex and Culture book, it strongly adds to my point on why premarital sex is bad for both individuals and also for society and its culture. I don't want to make premarital sex illegal by law, and I believe that having sex is an individual's choice and right. So what I want is that every individual has to be conscious about this topic, have to make the better choice of saving themselves for marriage and not give up to their sexual desires and lust. There's a heavy link between premarital sex and divorces, and couples with one partner are more likely to be happy in their marriage than those who don't. These stats are already explained in that same previous video. I suggest you view that. I will put it in the description and place it on the end screen and cards. So remember that every choice is not a good one, just because it's legally right doesn't mean it's morally right. Every choice has consequences, so make every choice consciously. Thank you, have a nice day.